Imagine this. You're sitting alone in the silence of your room. The lights are dim. There's no one around to blame, no noise left to distract you. And yet, that ache in your chest still pulses like an old scar that refuses to close. You touch it, not with your fingers, but with your thoughts, again and again, like pressing a bruise just to make sure it still hurts. But why? Why would you want to feel it? You say you want peace. You say you want healing. But when the world offers you a moment of quiet, a breath of stillness, you reach back into your mind and summon the pain, that old betrayal, that failure you can't forgive, the guilt you wear like a second skin. It's like your suffering has become a ritual, a comfort, a distorted friend you no longer know how to live without. What if the truth is not that you're broken, but that you've grown addicted to the feeling of being broken? It sounds absurd, doesn't it? That you might need your pain, that without it you'd feel lost, empty, stripped of something that once gave your life meaning, even if that meaning was misery. But what if this isn't weakness? What if this is a deeper, more profound distortion of the human soul? A loop you can't exit, not because you're trapped, but because you keep walking the same circle willingly? Why do you rehearse the same traumas, replay the same heartbreaks, nurse the same wounds? And what if the reason isn't just psychological, but existential? What if the truth hiding beneath your pain is far darker and far more familiar than you've ever dared to admit? Let's go there. You were not born craving pain, but somewhere along the way you began to associate it with truth. Somewhere between survival and self-discovery, suffering became your compass, because it felt real. In a world flooded with illusions, masks, and fleeting pleasures, pain stood out as the one thing you couldn't fake. And so, slowly, you began to trust it. You began to identify with it. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." But the cruel paradox is, some don't avoid it. Some dive into suffering because they believe it's the only path to authenticity. They believe that pain is the only honest emotion in a world that rewards performance over presence. Think back. Every time you've succeeded, you might have smiled for a moment, but it vanished quickly, didn't it? But pain? Pain lingers. It roots itself into your memory, your identity. You wrap it around your choices, like vines around a dying tree. You tell yourself the hurt shaped you, made you stronger. But what if that's not the full story? Friedrich Nietzsche warned that he who fights with monsters should look to it that he himself does not become a monster. And what is pain, if not the most seductive monster of all? One that whispers, "Stay with me, I am proof that you feel, proof that you are alive." This is the hidden problem. Not that pain exists, but that you've moralized it, romanticized it, built an altar to it in the dark corners of your psyche, and worshipped it as though it were sacred. The martyr archetype lives deep inside many of us, fueled by religious programming, generational trauma, and the existential dread of meaninglessness. To suffer is to be good. To endure is to be worthy. And so, without realizing it, you turn away from peace. Not because you hate it, but because it makes you feel fraudulent. Arthur Schopenhauer believed suffering was the essence of life, that existence itself was a form of torment. But that view, while bleak, resonated with many, not because it was freeing, but because it validated their inner chaos. If life is suffering, then at least their struggle meant something. At least they weren't alone in the void. But there's another layer, deeper, more insidious. Modern society sells pleasure, but it doesn't sell meaning. So you consume joy like sugar, only to crash into yourself later, needing the bitterness to feel balanced again. You become your own pendulum, swinging between numbness and pain, because the middle ground, contentment, feels foreign, untrustworthy, almost hollow. Viktor Frankl, a survivor of the Holocaust, said that when a person can't find a deep sense of meaning, they distract themselves with pleasure. But what happens when pleasure no longer distracts you? When the entertainment fades, when the noise settles, and you're left with the same unresolved ache? You turn inward, not toward healing, but toward repetition, because pain becomes ritual, a pattern, and you become loyal to that pattern. Not out of choice, but because your subconscious believes it's the only familiar terrain. You begin to fear healing, because healing demands you let go. And letting go feels like losing yourself. So you feed the pain, you scroll through old messages, you revisit betrayals, you rehearse arguments in the shower. You say you want closure, but secretly you want permission to keep feeling the ache. It reminds you that you exist, even if that existence is fractured. Even Jean-Paul Sartre, the existentialist, wrote about the unbearable freedom of choice, that we are condemned to be free. Pain, paradoxically, limits that freedom. It gives you a script, a reason, an excuse. It simplifies the unbearable complexity of being human. So the question now isn't just why do you hurt, but why do you keep returning to the hurt? Because to escape, it would mean rewriting your identity. And that's not just painful, it's terrifying. But is there a cost to this hidden loyalty? Is there a moment where the very pain that once grounded you becomes the cage you cannot see? Let's look deeper. You wake up every morning, carry out your routine, and to the outside world you look functional. You show up. You smile when needed. You talk about progress, growth, ambition. But beneath all of it, there's a quiet weight dragging behind every step, a heaviness you can't quite name. And perhaps the most tragic part is, you don't even notice it anymore. Because this is your normal. That's how pain works when it settles in long enough. It blends. It becomes the filter through which you perceive everything. Joy gets diluted. Love feels suspicious. Hope becomes something you mock quietly, even as you pretend to chase it. You wear the wounds so long that healing feels like betrayal, as if becoming whole would erase the only part of you that ever felt real. This is where the consequences begin to rot the foundation of your life, not with loud destruction, but with a silent erosion. Relationships suffer first. You don't trust the love you receive because deep down, you're still bonded to your suffering. You either push people away or unconsciously invite those who mirror your wounds, people who wound you in familiar ways because unfamiliar kindness feels unnatural, like an alien language you were never taught to speak. It's not self-sabotage in the dramatic sense. It's quieter, more cunning. You hesitate to fully embrace success, fearing it might expose your deepest belief, that you don't deserve it. You stay in unfulfilling jobs, environments, even friendships, because comfort has never meant joy to you. It's meant predictability, and pain, above all, is predictable. Cognitive biases amplify this cycle. Take confirmation bias. Your mind constantly searches for data that confirms what you already believe. If you believe you're unworthy, you will interpret even neutral events as proof. A friend doesn't text back. Rejection, a compliment, pity, an opportunity, a trap. Your brain rewires itself to find pain even when none exists, because it's the narrative it knows how to read. Then there's negativity bias, the psychological phenomenon where negative experiences weigh more heavily on your mind than positive ones. Evolution designed it as a survival mechanism, but in a modern world it becomes a prison. You cling to past wounds, traumatic moments, humiliations, because they feel more true than the quiet moments of peace you've long since stopped trusting. Neurologically, chronic emotional pain reshapes the brain. Neural pathways strengthen around recurring thoughts. The more you replay that memory, the stronger its imprint becomes. Your pain becomes your brain's default setting, and your sense of self forms around it. You don't just feel broken, you believe that you are broken, and society doesn't help. In fact, it profits from your hidden allegiance to pain. Self-help industries peddle endless fixes that reinforce the idea that something's inherently wrong with you. Social media platforms magnify your comparisons. They show you the curated perfection of others, making your internal chaos feel shameful. Like an exposed infection, you must quickly cover with filters and quotes about healing. But healing isn't popular. Drama is. Tragedy sells. Misery trends. And so the culture silently teaches you to stay in the loop, because that's where the attention is. That's where the stories are. That's where the meaning seems to be. Even language itself betrays you. You say, "my pain," as if it's a possession, a badge, an heirloom passed down from your ancestors, each generation adding their own carvings. And to discard it would mean dishonoring the suffering that came before you. So you keep it, you protect it, you may even nurture it. And all the while life continues, without you fully in it. Opportunities drift past like fog you're too numb to grasp. Love knocks at your door, but you've barricaded it from the inside. Purpose calls to you, but its voice is drowned out by the whisper of old wounds that never stopped singing lullabies of loss. You're not just living with pain, you're living through it. Like stained glass. Distorting the light, every emotion, experience, and connection is colored by it. And the most haunting part? You've confused that distortion for clarity. But what if you didn't have to? What if the way out isn't through more suffering, but through rebellion? Let's begin to turn the knife. Imagine, just for a moment, not needing it anymore. The ache, the familiar wound, the gravity that pulls you back into memories soaked in regret. What if, instead of tracing the same neural paths like a ghost stuck in a hallway of old echoes, you turned away? What if the rebellion isn't loud, angry, or dramatic, but silent, internal, and absolute? Here's the first radical truth. You are not your pain. You've experienced it, yes. You've carried it. But somewhere along the line, you made a silent, unconscious decision to wear it like armor, to confuse the wound for your identity, to build a throne of broken glass and sit atop it, calling it self-awareness. But what if that's not insight? What if it's inertia? The rebellion starts with dismantling the mythology around pain, that it makes you deeper, more authentic, or spiritually enlightened. Pain can awaken you, but only if you don't cling to it. The moment it becomes your worldview, your lens, your justification, it becomes another illusion. Carl Jung called this process individuation, the integration of all aspects of the self, including the shadow. But integration is not indulgence. You don't make peace with your darkness by sinking into it. You do it by witnessing it without worship, by saying, "Yes, you are a part of me, but you do not define me." It's time to rebel against the false god of suffering. How? By choosing discomfort over pain. There's a difference. Pain is repetitive, cyclical, familiar. Discomfort is unfamiliar. It comes from growth, from stepping outside the narrative, from not knowing who you'll be without the wound. And that's terrifying. But terror is a doorway. So take the terrifying step. Detach from the story. You are not the betrayal, not the trauma, not the failure. You experience them. They pass through you, but they are not you. Let them go, not because they weren't real, but because you are more real than they are. History is full of rebels who broke the loop. Viktor Frankl, in the shadow of Auschwitz, found freedom not in escape, but in meaning. He chose to see suffering not as identity, but as an opportunity to transcend. Nelson Mandela, 27 years in prison, emerged not as a man hardened by hate, but softened by purpose. He could have clung to the pain, but he chose the unknown path of peace. Your rebellion won't be written in books or carved in stone. It happens in those quiet, internal moments. When you notice the thought pattern and say, "No, not this time." When you choose to believe that peace is not boring or fake or hollow, but unfamiliar. And unfamiliar doesn't mean untrue. Start small. Catch yourself when the ache tries to anchor you, when your mind reaches back for the bruise. Interrupt it. Stand up. Breathe. Touch something real. Your hands, your breath, the present. Remind yourself, this moment is not the past. Redraw your boundaries, not just with people, but with your own thoughts. Don't let them trespass into your future with shadows from old scenes. Your loyalty is no longer to the pain, but to the possibility. And yes, you will feel withdrawal like any addiction. There's a detox. You may feel hollow, disoriented, even grief-stricken, because you're mourning an old self, a self who learned to survive through suffering. Honor them, but do not resurrect them. Rebellion is rebirth, and it's not just about removing the pain. It's about replacing it with purpose, with curiosity, with the uncomfortable but liberating question, who am I without this story? The answer is not in books or mantras or affirmations. The answer is forged, moment by moment, in the fire of your choice. You rewrite your identity not through fantasy, but through the disciplined practice of presence. Because only here, only now, can you be free. And freedom is not loud. It's not always joyful. Sometimes it's quiet, unassuming. A soft morning without regret. An evening without reliving the worst parts of yourself. Freedom, when you finally taste it, might not feel like victory. It might just feel like silence. But in that silence, something deeper stirs. Something ancient, sacred, and waiting. And that is where the final truth begins to rise. Now, when you stand at the edge of this great truth, there's no dramatic fanfare, no grand revelation that shakes the heavens. Instead, there's a quiet whisper that seeps into your bones, the moment you finally understand the deepest paradox of all. You never needed the pain in the first place. It's that simple and that earth-shattering. The greatest truth you will ever come to realize is not that you will be free of suffering, but that you can live fully without clinging to it, that you can still feel deeply and yet not be consumed by it. Because you are not just your pain. You are the witness to it. You are the soul who can experience the highs and the lows of life, yet remain untouched by them. That's the final revelation, the one that makes all the previous struggles fade into perspective. You've spent your life thinking pain was the price of depth, that only through torment could you truly know the beauty of life. But that's a lie that's been whispered into your ear since childhood, fed by stories of martyrdom, struggle, and survival. The truth is far simpler, more profound. You are the creator of your experience. You are the one who attaches meaning to every moment. And if pain is what you cling to, then pain is what you will become. But the moment you let go, that's when you unlock the door to freedom. You do not need to relive the past to find meaning. You do not need the weight of your history to guide you. You do not need the pain of your wounds to prove you are real. All you need is presence. Think about that for a second. In the vast expanse of time, in the endless cycle of human experience, you are here, in this moment, this breath, this now, and that in itself is more than enough. You may have thought that the greatest wisdom came from surviving the darkest moments, but real wisdom comes from knowing that you can rise above them, not through force, but through understanding. You've spent your life thinking healing was a destination, but healing is not about becoming whole. It's about realizing you were whole all along. The pain, the brokenness, were simply illusions that you mistook for your essence. This realization doesn't erase your history. It doesn't undo the wounds. What it does is release you from the need to hold them forever. What it offers is the freedom to let go. Not because you forget, but because you choose to live beyond the pain. The more you grasp this truth, the more it changes the way you experience the world. The harshness of life doesn't diminish your existence. It becomes the contrast that helps you appreciate joy, peace, and love more fully. You realize that you do not need suffering to know that you are alive. You can just be, without needing to prove your existence through the accumulation of pain. And so, the greatest act of rebellion, the final step, is not one of grand gestures. It's the simplest of all, choosing to live in the present, no longer chained to the past, no longer clinging to your wounds as though they define you. You will still feel pain, of course. Life will challenge you. But now, you face it with the full awareness that you are not bound by it. It doesn't have the power to define you. And in that quiet freedom, in the profound peace that arises when you no longer need to suffer to feel alive, something remarkable happens. You finally see yourself clearly. You are not the sum of your pain, your trauma, your mistakes. You are the consciousness that holds all of it and chooses to move beyond it. You have become the author of your own narrative, and in that story, pain is not the hero. Peace is. You are. Now stand in this truth. Let it fill your entire being. And know, this is not an end, but a beginning. This is the moment you have always been waiting for. The moment you choose to live not through your pain, but through your power, the power of presence, of choice, and of endless, boundless potential. You are free, and that, above all, is the most profound revelation of all. If this message stirred something inside you, don't let it fade. Hit like, share it with someone stuck in the cycle, and subscribe for deeper truths that challenge your mind and ignite your soul. This isn't motivation, it's transformation. Until next time, stay aware, stay awake,